this was a sick stunt, unfortunately, by South Africa to try to take the victims of genocide and cast that allegation against them.
UN's top court has told Israel that it must take all measures to prevent genocide in Gaza, but it has not ordered a ceasefire. The ruling at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, comes at an early stage of South Africa's case against Israel. South Africa's foreign minister says that the court order doesn't work without a ceasefire, but the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says that he welcomes the ICJ's decision.
We note the court's statement that it is acutely aware of the extent of the human tragedy that is unfolding in the region and is deeply concerned about the continuing loss of life and human suffering, and that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further.
Well, joining us now is Eylon Levy, a spokesperson for the Israeli government. Eylon, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
What are your thoughts on this ruling?
South Africa brought a case against Israel seeking to force it to suspend its military action against Hamas and abandon the hostages while leaving Hamas free to reoffend, and the court was wise to throw that out. It reaffirmed Israel has an inherent and natural right to defend its people and bring back the hostages, who, by the way, the court called for their immediate and unconditional release.
It hasn't quite thrown it out because it has said that there are grounds for this case to continue, and of course it will continue. It says that it does have the jurisdiction to look at it. It also, of course, did make reference to the hostages, but the case hasn't completely been thrown out because they are going to carry on looking into this case.
The court threw out South Africa's attempts to get an immediate stop to the war that would leave Hamas free to reoffend, but it's important to note that the court was very clear that in making these provisional measures, it is in no way passing any judgment on the merits of the case or even claiming that it has jurisdiction at all. What it did with these provisional measures was to remind Israel of what its obligations are under international law anyway, obligations that we've stated very clearly and take seriously. And our commitment to international law is, of course, unwavering, independent of any ICJ proceedings, as is our right to self-defense and to defend our people in the wake of the October 7 atrocities.
So the court's agreed that there is a prima facie evidence that the Palestinians could suffer crimes amounting to genocide. But of course, the judges will not come to a final decision for some time now because, of course, the case will carry on. But how do you think the fact that this case is going on and the fact that, they have they've made some kind of uncomfortable comments about Israel, how do you think this makes Israel look in the eyes of the world?
Well, clearly it's absurd that this is happening altogether. We are on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day now, and here in Israel we feel we're living somewhere in the upside down because on October 7th we were the victims of an act of genocide when Hamas sent its death squads to massacre as many people as possible, as brutally as possible. And since then we have been fighting a war so that Hamas cannot do that again, as it tells us that it wants to do, and to bring back the hostages. So this was a sick stunt, unfortunately, by South Africa to try to take the victims of genocide and cast that allegation against them. The dissenting judges, Aaron Barak and the Ugandan judge as well, have been scathing about the lack of grounds to continue the case. We're confident that any fair-minded court of justice will, of course, throw out these outrageous allegations and understand, by the way, the court was very clear in the preamble as well, this conflict is happening because Hamas declared war. And we expect people to hold Hamas accountable for the way it is fighting that war inside and underneath densely populated areas, trying, unfortunately, tragically, horrifically, in complete violation of international humanitarian law, to use civilians as human shields.
And of course, there's no doubt that what happened on the 7th of October, those 1,300 Israelis slaughtered, 240 people taken hostages, was nothing other than absolutely sick. It was a horrible, horrible event. No right-minded person can look at that and think there was any justification. It was an act of absolute abomination. There is also this ongoing war. We now have almost 26,000 Gazans killed. How does this stop? Because I'm sure you don't look at this situation with any joy or glee, and you look at the death toll in Gaza, I'm sure you don't think that is a great state of affairs. Where does this end? How does this end in any kind of peace? Because that's what everybody wants. Whatever side of this you're on, surely everybody wants a peaceful solution. How do we get there?
You're absolutely right. The humanitarian situation is horrific, and for us, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. But for Hamas, it is a strategy. Hamas's strategy at the moment, its only way to try to survive the massacre that it perpetrated on October 7th, is to try to generate as much humanitarian suffering as possible, to generate international outrage that will somehow force Israel to stop. But our problem is that Hamas abducted 253 hostages. We fear that the surviving hostages are being tortured and executed and raped as we speak. And the first thing Hamas did after conducting those atrocities was to tell us that it wants to do them again and again. So we have no good choices now. We are fighting in order to totally dismantle Hamas, remove it from power, and bring back the hostages, because otherwise Hamas will escape from this war free and emboldened to perpetrate those atrocities again. We wish we could wave a magic wand and simply make Hamas go away, but it isn't going to do that. And so we fight, and we fight not because we want to, but because we must.
Okay, well, look, we're grateful for your time. That's Eylon Levy, a spokesperson for the Israeli government. We will be speaking some from the Palestine Solidarity movement just after 6 o'clock to get their views as well.